the Elephant Room. This podcast is produced by the Louisiana Assemblies of God. Our vision is to encourage and equip leaders to do what God is calling you to do, where He is calling you to do it. The goal of each session of the Elephant Room is to have an open and honest conversation around the issues that are affecting leadership today. Issues that are often neglected, hidden, or ignored. Issues that the church, in many cases, have deemed too controversial to talk about. Here now to lead today's discussion is our Elephant Room host, Scott Holmes.
Hey, welcome to this edition of the Elephant Room. I believe we're going to have an amazing discussion ahead of us today with these great men around the table. And our goal for each of these Elephant Room sessions is to talk about current hot topics that are affecting leaders, that are affecting the church, and that are affecting the culture today. And I think our discussion around the table today is incredibly important, and probably in our discussion, we're not just going to talk about one elephant. We may uncover a herd of elephants today. But I'd like to say, even though our topic obviously is going to be racism, that I'd really like to run to a more focal point, because we could spend not just the next hour talking about racism or the next week or month, because it seems like that's a topic people have been talking about for generations. But let's run to that focal point of the answer and the solution, and how we can all be part of that, and then how we can challenge others in our church to be part of the solution and the answer. So that's where we're going to today. So, hey, I just want to start our time together first by saying thank you for joining us. You folks are leaders from around the state. You've come from all over Louisiana. You're all part of our Assembly of God Fellowship, and I believe that puts us together in a way to really address this issue. And again, I just say thank you for coming. But I'd love to start just by just kind of going around the table and introducing yourself, and just kind of telling people where you're at and where you serve. So, Jonathan, let's start with you.
All right, my name's John Smith. I'm the senior pastor, lead pastor of House of Prayer Church in New Orleans on Canal Street, and I've been there for 20 years, and I've been lead pastor for the last 17 years. So,
Welcome, Jonathan. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
My name is Byron Starks, and I was privileged to meet John years and years ago. We were actually the only two African American, Black, however you want to call it, youth pastors in the Assemblies of God during that time. So we have a common bond. But I've been a part of the Assemblies for probably over 20 years now. Grew up in a small rural community of Grambling in North Louisiana, which is about 99.9% Black. Had a good experience of coming to University of Louisiana. Played 4 years of college ball here. Had the wonderful opportunity to train with the Miami Heat and Utah Jazz. Upon that, got right involved in ministry after a small stint overseas playing basketball. And God has allowed me the opportunity to coach, be involved in my children's lives. And we're part of fellowship in Lafayette, Crossroads Church with Pastor Jeff Abels. And we're part of the solution and not a part of the problem.
Amen. And you currently...
Yes, sir. Currently coaching at LSU Eunice. We actually just started the program 2 years. We've been in existence, and thankfully we've been able to win the conference championship this year. I was just privileged of getting the Louisiana Junior College Coach of the Year. And we have big and brighter things. Actually, we could talk about the recruiting class and a whole lot of other things. But I'm blessed.
Yeah, I just saw that post. So congratulations, Coach.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Coach.
Frankie, I'm Stewart, pastor at Christian Fellowship Assembly of God in South Monroe, Louisiana, and I've been there around 30 years now, and we're still having some good times there. I was born in Monroe, Louisiana. Finished high school, went to the Army, got separated from the Army, came back to Monroe, worked with Monroe City schools, and that's why I'm retired from the school system.
That's great. Thank you, Pastor, for coming.
I'm Don Banks. I'm pastor of the Greater Wilderness Cathedral in Monroe, have been for the last 24 years. We have moved to the north side of Monroe the last couple of years, but we've just continued to serve the Lord there and been faithful in that ministry, and God has really shown himself to be a good God to us in that area. So,
Amen.
thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor, for joining us today.
Sullivan Turner, and I am administrative pastor at Glad Tidings Church. I've been there for 6 years. Prior to that, I spent 10 years doing Chi Alpha at McNeese State University. And so I did Chi Alpha at Lake Charles, on staff at Lake Charles, so it was an easy transition.
That's good. Amen. That's right.
That's good. I'm Jonathan Burton. I'm lead pastor of Regeneration Church, 9th Ward, the Mighty Nine. Woo woo. It's interesting though, side note, my wife has been wanting me to meet you.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm a former basketball player as well. Played at Southeastern University, won the only national championship in Southeastern history. Wow. We hope we have some more, but I'm a part of that team. Went on and played a little professionally before the Lord just said, okay, give that up and focus totally on me. And so God has afforded me a lot of opportunities. Came back to the city here, also the associate director of Louisiana Black Advocates for Life. And so just on the front line in the community and the state, just really, trying to reach people with the gospel.
That's great.
Hey, I am Thomas Gross, pastor of Living Faith Christian Fellowship. I don't have all these sports accolades.
You don't need them.
I did play Little League Baseball, and we won the championship, by the way. Okay. And then flag football in junior high school.
There you go.
But at any rate, I grew up in Los Angeles. I was born here in New Orleans. I got saved in the Church of God in Christ. And this is another former Kojic brother here as well. And we moved to, we left the Church of God in Christ and went to the Assemblies of God in 1980. First assembly pastored by Marvin Gorman, it's a long history there. And then eventually I started pastoring in 1987, I believe it was. And so that's our history. Wow. And I'm pastor of Living Faith Christian Fellowship, is located 4339 Eastern Street in Gentilly.
There you go. There you go.
Shelby Gentilly.
Again, man, it's great to have you around the table. I feel incredibly honored to be sitting here and surrounded by all of you. And I just want to jump right into our topic. And John, I just would love for you to just kick us off here with I hope and believe and pray that, our topic today is going to just give itself to some real spontaneous remarks and comments. But I do want to just kind of keep us going to make sure we get to that conclusion of spending time talking about the answer and the solution. But I would like to just kind of go back a little bit in history and ask all of you, or at least those of you that like to comment on this particular question. I'd just like you to tell us about your earliest memory of an experience of racism. Maybe it might not even be that first, but how about a formidable moment in your life that that experience maybe created a wake-up call that would just say, hey, this is the way this is the way it's going to be. So, take it away.
So, I grew up in Slidell, which is about 30 minutes north of New Orleans. I played football. I was an athlete my whole life. I was an all-star in Little League football, and I didn't know that I had been watched by different high schools in my area and region, and there was a particular private high school that had been watching me. So when I turned 13, they came to my house, they knocked on my door and said, listen, we've been watching you throughout your Little League, and we would like to offer you a scholarship to come to this school. And my mom, having wisdom to see the opportunity, really urged me and pushed me in that direction, and I'm glad that she did. But one of the aspects of that was at the time, I didn't know that I would be the only black person in my entire class. And I was only one of 5 in the entire school. So of the whole population, I think we were, maybe 2% or 1% black in the entire school. So coming from an all black community to now being immersed into an entirely white community with no African American representation was a shock. But that wasn't even the big issue. I think within my first year or two of being at the school, I think that was the year that David Duke ran for governor of the state of Louisiana. And I remember, students, kids that were in my class in one grade above me, walking around with David Duke placards, vote for David Duke, vote for David Duke. And I mean, we can't vote. We're kids. We're 13, 14, 15, 16. So it was not even the issue of the ability to vote, but it was what it represented. Because it was known that he was, the former leader of the Ku Klux Klan, that he was a prominent racist, a prominent hater of, blacks, of Jews, of minorities. And to have kids walking around, with placards, vote for David Duke and David Duke for governor, I think that was one of those moments in my mind where it was etched that race, there's a division when it comes to race. And it wasn't something I was looking for. It was more something that was kind of thrust and kind of placed at the forefront of my conscience and of my mind and of my life. And I think, those moments are the moments that shape you, because I think sometimes you're forced to make decisions and forced to have to consider things that you never knew you had to consider.
Yeah.
And that was a moment where it was like, wow, why? That was kind of maybe the big why. Why are we even dealing with and talking about this at the age of 13, 14, 15, when we can't vote, when I felt like there wasn't a voice that I had? Because when you're 1% of the population and young, it's not like I was a senior where I had the influence of time. I was in the early parts of my high school career. It felt emasculating. It felt devastating, because who was I going to go talk to? Who was I going to voice and say, I feel very uncomfortable with these kids walking around with David Duke signs? I feel do I go to my principal? Do I go to a teacher? And who's going to listen to what I have to say with some sense of understanding or sympathy for the reality of the isolation and the lack of a voice being in that moment?
It's like you wake up with this realization that people are against me. They don't even know me.
Correct.
But they're against me because of the color of my skin.
And for that alone, and for no other reason.
Yeah. Anybody else want to jump into that?
Well, I'll just say mine goes back even further than that. Of course, I played sports all the way through, school and so forth. But being in the sports arena, mainly basketball, football, and track, then even back when you go back to the I guess they call it Pee Wee League now, Pop Warner. But I just remember just playing defense, having a really good game, and really just enjoying football. And then someone out of the crowd, hey, stop that little N word, And for the first time in my life, I had to be 8, 9 years old, but I felt the pain of that statement, and then there was nothing done. So, I kept playing, and as a kid would do, but I left that game with just a bold reality in my mind that this is the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
And so, it kind of fixed me in a certain way that had to be adjusted later in my life for me to be able to become the person I am now. But it's something that, even now when you think about it, at 8 years old, out there playing football, it's just, you don't even think that, much like what Pastor said here, you don't even think that would be an issue. But even that early, and then going on through school in that sports arena, you seeing that play out. Now, when I was in high school, I played for West Monroe High School, which is predominantly white. Was at that time was like 2% of the population, and it was. And of course, the mascot there is a rebel flag, and so it was a constant tension. Your whole life.
Still is.
Still is, even now, yeah. Yeah, I still have struggles right there in Monroe now dealing with that. But to go back to an early one, I think a lot of kids are like me or have been like me, that's particularly been in that arena of sports, that they saw it or felt it earlier based on the color of their skin, is particularly let's face it, a lot of African Americans are very athletic and they're very good at what they do, and that is quite I guess aggravates them or whatever it is, and it brings out the worst in people.
Yeah. Yeah. Who else?
Just from my experience, I think about one was that I remember I was about 10 years old. I was in the neighborhood walking down the street going home. The police pulled me over. I'm walking. He got out of his car. He stopped me. And he started asking me questions and started talking to me, asking me where I live. I showed him where I live. I told him I live right down here. And I remember making a statement that he would put his foot in my you-know-what. And I'm like, I'm 10 years old. This is an adult. And it's a police officer. And it really impacted me, because I remember I went home and he put me in the back of the car. I didn't do anything. It was for no reason. So he bring me home. He talked to my parents and tell them, I was down the street or whatever. And then when he left, I told them what he said to me, and they was like, "Why didn't you tell me that when he brought you home?" I was like, "Well, I'm 10 years old. I didn't know how to process when an adult tell you something of that nature." It was kind of like a shock. And I remember I was going through a time I was mad at the system, mad at God, because I was like, man, is this the way it's going to be? Yeah. And so it impacted me. And then just a lot of scenarios. But then one other situation when I was in high school, was playing a game. We had a really good team. And then one of the black kids got a penalty. And I distinctly remember that one of our coaches said, "You were playing like a N." He called it. He said, "You're not playing like a black person. You're playing like an N." And it just touched me, because I'm like, what does that mean? Because everybody on our team at one point in time has gotten a penalty, but this penalty designated a name that we know that is not acceptable, is not spoken, but he was playing like that, and that really have left an impact on me during that time.
Pastor Gross?
My earliest memory is, I think I was about 8 years old, and we were living in at least I was living in Los Angeles with my aunt and her husband, my uncle, and he had a stroke and was in the hospital for a few months, and so we would go visit him, occasionally, and so this was one of those nights that we had gone to visit him, and I was probably about 8 years old, and so there were two white boys that came, and we started playing. And so we were just playing, and at the time, I'm at where I was from being, 8 years old, it just never occurred to me, that there was any difference between us. I was naive. I was extremely naive. Mm-hmm. And so what happened was, one of the white boys said to me, I guess he just started teasing me. Bye bye, bad black sheep. You remember that nursery rhyme? And he said that, and I was so naive, to be honest with you. That just kind of went over my head. I didn't feel it. It didn't make any sense to me. But the other white boy, he was there and he didn't like it, so he beat him up. So there was a sense of vindication there, there's naivety, and then there's a sense of, and as I grew older, I began to realize the significance of what he did. Because he basically said, I don't like what you did, I don't like what you said to him. We're friends, and then we're playing, and you did this. So he actually beat the boy up right there on the spot. So that was my first introduction. But then I began to realize, not so much is this the way it's going to be, but I realized this is the way it is. Yeah.
Wow. Interesting.
That's a powerful statement right there.
Yeah.
That's a powerful statement.
As I sit here and think about some of the times that I've had these situations come to the forefront of my life, I just come to the understanding that because of the place that I grew up in, you just became numb to it. It is what it is. That's just what happens. And so I can many situations as a teenager. One that really sticks out to me is me and a couple friends. We were headed from the movie theater, and we were going home, and we got pulled over. And so we got pulled over. Nothing was wrong. I knew nothing was wrong, but they had us all get out the car and put our hands on the hood, and they searched all of us, just like I was probably about 16. And I'm like, officer, what did we do? He was like, shut up. I'm not talking to you. Shut up. And I'm like, what the world? And so we were taught just to comply, and just comply. No matter what happens, just comply, and tell us when you get home. And so that was the thing, that's what we were taught. And so when he got done, and they brought the dog out, all kind of craziness, and I'm like, what the world is going on? And so we're sitting there, and we're scared because we don't know what's gonna happen, if they're gonna take us to jail, because they had like 2 cop cars, and they spread us out amongst those 2 cop cars where we couldn't talk to each other. And they patting us down, doing all. I'm like, what the world? And you know what? He said, all right, you're free to go. Don't have those high beams on anymore. Oh, goodness. Yes, for real. So he pulled us over for the high beams.
Wow.
I didn't even have my high beams on. So, now that I'm older, I understand it now, and I've actually fought one of those cases before, and it got threw out immediately because I got profiled again. But again, the thing was, we were numb to it. It's just like, this is just the way of life. Like, we live in this society to whereas, comply so that you can live to fight another day. That was the thing, because we heard the stories of people being taken back to the orange groves that I lived around. People talked about us stuff. People came up missing. What happened to that person? And so I lived that. That's the crazy thing. I lived that. So when I see these movies, and I'm like, man, I grew up in that, where we just had to comply, just be quiet. Whatever they tell you, don't get upset. They call you the N-word, don't get upset. Just do whatever they say. Stay calm, just comply. And that's how we were taught. I had uncles. Some of you all might know Otis Bird's song. He's a 4-time NBA All-Star player. He was the first player, black or white, to gross $1 million contract as a guard in the NBA. And so my other uncle, Norris Bird song, a lot of people don't know him, but he was just as good as my Uncle Otis. And my uncle will probably watch this, but the story is that my Uncle Norris was actually even better than my Uncle Otis. And so, Uncle Otis, please don't kill me for that one. But, but that's what the story is. But what happened was, during desegregation, when they went to the white high school, the coach didn't let them play, even though they were the best on the team. And so my Uncle Norris was really good at football, so he was a hothead, and he quit. He was like, man, I don't have to take this. My Uncle Otis took it, and then the rest is history. He broke high school records. He went to the University of Houston, broke records there, got his jerseys retired. He just went into the Hall of Fame for college, a couple of years back. And my Uncle Narves is like, if I'd have kept my head, that could have been me.
Wow.
And he always told me, he said, Jonathan, going through these sports, this and that, he was like, you got to keep a level head. He said, because the thing is, all it takes is one mistake, and it can ruin the rest of your life. And so, I had, growing up, these are the people that influenced me. So it helped me to be able to, keep a cool, calm, collective attitude. But when you look at it, what is a teenager having to comply to that arena, and to be numb to it, like, this is just life. This is the way I'm supposed to. Like, it is what it is. Like, that just should never happen.
Good.
Well, mine go back to high school, just like several of you all do. It was about the third year of integration, and I was going to Wasserman High School at the time, and it was just like a powder keg, just waiting on somebody to strike the match, because it was, so much tension, and so much tension, and the principal didn't help that much either. He kind of spewed racism and, made it plain that he didn't care for us. And we get suspended and for little of nothing, and, these other kids couldn't do whatever, Anyway, it got to the point till nobody made any plans or anything like that. But it got to the point, it's like, okay, if something don't change, it's going to only get worse. And so there was some different fights going on here and there, some on campus, some off campus. And this was one Tuesday morning in 1973. I was in 11th grade then. And it's like all the black children that went to Wasserman High School were standing out in front of the school. Our bus was the last bus to get there. And it's like when we stepped off that bus, it's like, y'all, that's what, I can't remember who asked that question. He said, but what y'all want to do? And 10 seconds later, boom, it's like everything erupted. Every time I see that on TV like the other night, it reminds me of that high school riot that we had, back then. Well, anyway, they called the police, and, they were just dashing us here and there and different things. And what they had decided to do was, call in, certain people, people that they felt like could help them out. And so, to get things back on track and different things like that. But finally, they got rid of the other principal. And when he left, then everything began to cool down, because the assistant principal was very likable. And so that was something that was able to quench before it got any worse. But it's just the idea, that, hey, look, we didn't ask to go to nobody's schools. We were fine where we were, But if we got to go there, we want the same rights as everybody else. And I think that proved that. And, from far as I know now, they never had another one. So.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. Hey, let's switch gears and maybe progress a few years to just recent. And I think that for a lot of folks that maybe are tuning in and listening with us, watching, so many times I think we're guilty of trying to categorize some of these issues as, maybe not 200 years ago but maybe a few generations ago or one generation ago. But as we see in the current news, obviously, it's alive and well. But for you, maybe what's some of your recent experiences that have personally affected you in this area of racism?
Well, me, I've always taken the stance that I'm not a victim. Okay, we've never taught our children about skin color, although we can see it. My mom never taught us that. Even growing up in a majority black community, it was just more about loving people for who they are. I had a friend in elementary school, Joey. He was a white guy. This is way back when I was in kindergarten, and I can remember my relationship with him. We had two guys in our high school, Cricket and Bucket, and look, they had some country names now. but they never had any issues or problems with us as well. But I would say, my children, the way that we have taught them, and I can say I didn't experience it myself. I've been called the N word, but it was in a group setting. I just attribute it to ignorance, even more so than racism. Yeah. But my middle son, when he was at school, came home crying one day, and he said, "I don't have any friends at this school." And my wife asked, like, what happened? And he said he was called a stupid colored. All right, so he was bawling. He wasn't crying because the individual called him a colored. He was crying because they called him stupid, because we didn't teach them anything regarding race. Now he was affected by that comment of being called stupid, but it gave me a realization that it does exist in some homes. There are people that still talk about it, or still train their children up, and of course, even in the profession that I'm in, we could look at a lot of issues that may be related to race. You can look at the number of black coaches. You can look at the number of black executives, that are given an opportunity. My only experience is, I know that there are hurdles that we have to face, but I'm always of the faith that God is in control. You may first face challenges, but that at the end of the day, if God has something in store for you, it's going to happen. Now, do we have to combat it? It's no doubt about it. Yeah. But I choose not to be, oppressed by it. I choose not to be a victim of it. And in order for us to take on those issues, we need to do what we're doing now. Yeah. I've got my oldest son's godfather is Guatemalan. He's married to a white lady. My neighbor is African American, married to a white lady, and I've got a good friend that's he's black, married to, we call him a sister. All right, so why would society want to disrupt that friendship and relationships that we have? Right. So I choose not to, even play the race card. I know there are a lot of race hustlers out there that's taking advantage of these moments. Yeah. And you can see it's going to come up every 4 years. Yeah. But at the end of the day, there are things that need to be systematically addressed. Yeah. But you don't do them by rioting, looting, and things of that nature.
Right. One of the things, Sullivan, it's a story that involves you. Mm-hmm. It's a couple years ago, we were headed to Springfield, Missouri, and you being our men's director here in the state, we were headed to a meeting, and we were passing through a town in northern Arkansas. Yes. And as first time, I guess I noticed it, I knew you were an hour or so behind me, I believe, driving your car up, and I'm driving through Harrison, Arkansas, and this is just recent. I see this big billboard advertising a white supremacist radio, just a
broadcast.
Yeah, radio broadcast, and a particular radio station, totally devoted to that. And I'm thinking, my immediate response was, Sullivan's right behind me. So
no, that's right.
I text you on the phone is like, gas up and don't stop in Harrison.
That's right. You did.
But
you did.
Hey, what are some just recent moments for some of you?
Well, I have one. It was actually when I was playing ball, and it was shocking because I was playing in Hawaii. So out in Hawaii, if you all know, Polynesian, Samoan people, like they have a problem against white people. Right. They call them haoles. And so you'll see a lot of, they don't really mess with blacks out there. I saw some craziness, but so I'm in a situation and, I'm in class and I remember it. And I answered a question and my professor looked at me like, I can't believe you know that. Like, seriously. and not even, and when I answered the next question, it was like, wow, you actually know that. Said that out their mouth. In the class, it was like, you actually know that. And I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? He's like, oh, never mind. So I was like, can I talk to you after class? And so it was like, well, how the basketball team doing? How this and that? I was like, well, we're doing good. It's like, that's good, that's good. And I'm not gonna name the university because I don't want to get nobody in trouble. But it was like, you just like we're gonna get that championship this year. And I'm like, well, maybe it's like, well, just focus on that. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? I was like, don't worry, just focus on that. And I'm like, so what are you saying? You just want, like, I don't have to do any work? It's like, I'm not really saying that, but I'm just saying just focus on that, and you're gonna be all right. And it's just like, what the world? And I'm looking at, and the coach at the time, lied to me about some stuff, about my major, and they accepted my major because he was in a contract year. So he brought in like 8 All-Americans from around. And so we was fighting, literally fist fighting at practice because we felt each other was not getting the ball like we should be. And so when I had I had a little conference with him to ask him, why did he lie to me? He was like, why are you worrying about it? He's like, we're going to pay for your bachelor's and your master's. You shouldn't worry about it. You're living in paradise. And I'm just like, you just straight up like you looked at me and you just straight up profiled me like I'm just, here to play some ball and to be with the women. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, and I told him straight up, I said, look, I'm here first for my education. I said, basketball is a tool to get my education. And if you can't understand that, I got to go. And I left. But how many in that situation would have been strong enough to stand up for that? Right. And it's just like, I got it at the whole university, not just the teachers where they were looking at, well, you just a dumb jock, just go back there and go to sleep and win us a championship, and here's my coach, like, you just need to be grateful that we're gonna pay for your schooling. Like, you can do any degree you wanna do. Like, so I just throw down 2 years of hard work so you give me a handout of, no, it don't work like that. But this happened to me, and so I dealt with this at this university, so I ended up only staying a semester, but it threw my whole life off balance because now I'm way out in Hawaii. I got to come all the way back to the States and like start this whole process over again. And that's how I ended up at Southeastern. So it was a God thing, but I just couldn't believe that. I'm just like, you literally, you don't know me. You didn't look at my transcript and you didn't see the grades that I made. You didn't see. It's just like, well, you're in paradise. You're a black African-American male. All you want to do is play basketball. So, here you go. Don't worry about it. Go to sleep and it's all right. That's what was pretty much told to me, and it's just, that's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
Wow. Well, I think for a lot of us, most of the racism that we encounter now is mostly systematic. It's where we go. It's when we go to the bank. It's when we go to do certain things. Those of us that are affiliating with some of the community leaders and some on the corporate structure, different things like that. When we engage certain projects, then that's how we feel it a lot now. We're in a time now where a lot of our children and grandchildren, they're going to college, they're getting educated, they're doing things with their lives that our grandparents and great-grandparents didn't even think was possible. But it's so systematic now. When we turn the television on, when we watch the news, and it's all these things that's saying to you, you can't, or you won't, or we won't let you. And we could break those structures down from politics, and even in dare I say, but even in the church, it's the same kind of. There's not a lot of, we're fortunate here in the Assemblies of God where we reach out to a variety of ethnic groups and different things like that, but not all do, and so there's this existent racism that just happened on these levels of systems that we run into in everything, every major pursuit we try to do. And it could be as pastors, it could be doing the things of God and trying to take your ministry to the next level to reach more people so that others may be saved. But you can't, because you got to deal with the perception of the racism and others' perceptions about your community or what you're going to do. So I think that personally for me, we have people get stopped. We have to, I had talks with my son. I was a police officer one time. I had to have talks with my son about what to do. when you stop, because I wasn't for him. I wasn't really worried about. I just want him to come home. Just want him to come home, and I'll deal with it tomorrow, kind of a thing like that. So it's all systematic, and it's in these work structures. It's in the tests. I had to teach my son and teach my daughters how to take tests. What different, like they were all brainy, much smarter than I was when I was in school. But, when you take certain tests, some tests, if you don't know the direction because of your culture, you're going to be answering questions a certain way, not realizing you're failing the test. And that's hard to explain to a person that's not a black person or a brown person or something like that, because they don't see it. So.
Yeah, that's good. Good points.
No, in listening to this, one thing, as far as the police is concerned, I learned a long time ago, and it's just something I learned, but you learn some things through Scripture too.
Yeah.
And I learned the concept of authority and understanding how, okay, this is authority, then I'm going to respect that authority, regardless of what you do, because you are a person of authority, so I will respect that authority. So as a result, with the many white policemen that may have stopped me, and they may have stopped me for cause, traffic or something like that, but because of the respect that I give them, it makes a great big difference. You see, and sometimes people will, why are you stopping me? You see, or they become, resistant. You see, I don't resist the authority. I give them all of that. And see, I've also learned something in that. I've learned that there are some of those individuals who are power hungry, and they suck that up. They eat that up, you see. So they think that, okay, I've got him bowing to me, and I'm such a great man. But then what he doesn't understand is that I'm actually controlling him, you see, because that's what's going on. I'm giving him what he wants, you see. And then at the end of the day, a lot of times I've missed tickets. Maybe I should have gotten a ticket, but they tell me, okay, you can go. You see, have a nice day, and I'll shake their hand. Thank you, sir. I give them all the sirs and everything. It works. Yeah. You see, that works a whole lot better than resistance. That's what I've discovered. See, but another thing I've learned too, over the years is there's a scripture. One of my favorite scriptures is what is it? Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God." In one of my experiences, I worked for the old South Central Bell. I was a supervisor, and the third level supervisor really loved me. He really respected me. The second level supervisor did not, but he was my immediate supervisor because I was a first level, and so I had to deal with him. And I won't go into the whole. It's a very long story. So I won't go into all the little injustices and the ways that that he dealt with me, but he finally ended up, I guess, doing what he wanted to do. He suspended me. He said, because you did this, you see, and I did what I did as a supervisor, but see, he didn't care because it was about this. So he said, because you did this, I'm suspending you. Okay, so this was on a Wednesday, so I was suspended Thursday and Friday. I missed a couple of days. Actually, it was Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So I missed a couple of days pay, you see, and that was really something. So he said, well, I'll find out what you want to do next week, you see. So at this time, I was really frustrated with this guy. So I told him right then and there, I said, you know what? I want my tools back, meaning I want to go back down, to basically what we call craft. And he said, no, you can tell me when you come in Monday. I said, okay. So Monday came in, he said, what do you want to do? I said, I want my tools back. Just like that. And so what he did was he called my former supervisor, that I was under, and he asked that supervisor if he wanted me back. This was also another white supervisor. And when he asked him, do you want Tommy back? He said, heck yeah, I'll take him back. Now, he didn't say heck. I'm sorry.
Thank you for
I'll
keeping
take
it
him
clean.
back.
What did he say now?
Maybe the word with the hockey sticks. Okay? But anyway, the point I'm making, so he took me back. And his reason was because, see, when I was actually under him before, I was one of the top technicians. You see, and that's another thing I learned. You do your best. You'll stand out. There's no question about it.
Well, you just cure ignorance with kindness,
Right.
and with your skill.
Exactly. So I was a top technician. That's why he took me back. And he told me later on, he said, when they told me it was you, he said, I was actually over my limit. He said, when I took you back, he said, but there's no way in the world I was going to leave you out there. That's what he told me. Now, the thing about that all things work together for good is the last point. When I got my paycheck, I wound up getting enough overtime, when I went back, to where I actually netted more than I would have grossed on that particular check as a supervisor. So God will be with you when you do what's right. God will be with you and he'll vindicate you.
Yeah.
Okay, just like I was vindicated by the little white boy before. Well, he will vindicate you in some way, shape, or form. He will vindicate you when you do what's right.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Good. Go ahead, John.
I think so. This happened, I believe, this last year. This was at the campground when we had the men's retreat. There was, obviously we have the rural, the suburban, and then the urban churches and communities that come.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a particular guy, young Caucasian guy, maybe in his late 20s, early 30s, and he definitely was not in the urban. I don't believe he was in the suburban. I believe he was in more of the rural group.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that we have people that saved and not saved that come, and you invite them hoping they get saved at the men's retreat. But I remember every time I passed by this guy, he'd have this scowl on his face, like this angry hatred look. So I'm a person, I learned that I don't operate by perception. I want to operate by truth. So when I see something that doesn't look right, I test it. Mm-hmm. And I remember 2 or 3, that's just, that's how I function. So instead of assuming that there was a racist issue there, I said, I'm not going to assume. So I intentionally went out of my way on 2 separate occasions to speak to the guy. And he refused to speak to me. And then the second time I got to the point where I walked up to him and said, hey man, how are you doing? And he turned his face away from me. And he refused, even me being a face-to-face, to speak to him. And I said, wow, racism is alive and well in 2020. But even at that point, I said, I'm not gonna let his attitude or his nasty spirit towards me or towards anybody affect what I came here for. And I said, if I can be a bridge, so be it. And if not, him and God have to deal with that. But while I'm at this worship service or this altar or this retreat, I'm gonna keep my eyes on the Lord. But I did. I made sure that what I felt was verified through approaching him and not just assuming. But yeah, that happened even as of this year, earlier this year. Yeah.
You sure it wasn't because y'all beat them on the 3-on-3 competition?
Those guys had a whole different feeling.
Yeah.
SmackDown.
Yeah.
Anyway, this happened a few years ago. I was on my way home in the afternoon, and if you know anything, I live, you got to go up 165 north, okay? And so I'm on my way home, and in order to get to my house, you're going to have to make a right turn. And they got the thing slated there for the right turn, so you won't have to wait for the other cars. Well, anyway, I noticed the sheriff. The sheriff was coming behind me, like, is she following me, or what is the deal here? So I, made the turn to go to my house, and then when she turned right behind me and threw her lights on. And I'm like, what this lady want? And so I asked her, I said, well, ma'am, can I help you? And she said, you know what, you made a bad turn. I say, well, that's the right turn. If you're going to turn right, that's what it says. Right lane, turn right. That's what I learned now. She got another interpretation, I don't know. And so she just started yelling at me. You should not have done this, and you should not have done that, and you should have not. And I'm like, making a right turn? Going to my house? Oh, she wrote me up. And so a couple of months later, I had to go to court. And so the district attorney, she was talking to me and different things, and I was telling her what happened. And she was saying, well, when she came in here, she was all belligerent, like you had, crushed the world or something. And so she probably talked to me longer than she needed to. Anyway, she said, now, I've been talking to you the whole time we've been here, and you haven't raised your voice. I said, and I don't. I got to be screaming to save somebody's life or something, but I don't. I'm not a loud person, and and just like authority, I respect authority. And I told her, I said, and I respect authority, and I tell all the people in my church to respect authority. She said, oh, you're a pastor, huh? She threw it out. Threw it out. She said, you've been calm and cool and collective and everything. It's hard for me to believe that you changed that much. I said, I didn't. So.
Hey, let's switch gears for a little bit.
Thank you for tuning in to our discussion today. We would love to hear from you. You can send your questions, comments, or thoughts on future topics to elephantroom@laaog.org. We look forward to joining you again soon in the Elephant Room.